it's Dorothy Guining with Scrapbooking Quebec. Today I'm here for the Scrapbook Nerd online shop, and I'm going to be creating a super easy double page spread featuring Echo Park Paper's Fall Fever collection. Here is the material I'll be using. It's basically a bunch of leftovers from this collection, along with some cardstock from Basil and Simple Stories. I love this collection and I'm using every scrap of it. These products came from the Scrapbook Nerd online shop, so I will put links to the shop along with the products I use in the description box below. So let's jump right in and have a look at what's on my scrap table. And I did some preparation in advance. You can see I have a double page frame style foundation page. There are 6 papers there. I am showing you for the white cardstock. I rounded the outer corners. I did got 4 of the papers, and there is a tutorial on my channel where I explain how I do that. So that will be listed and linked below. I printed my journaling on 8.5 by 11 vellum. I'm showing you the papers I have. Some of them came from behind the foundation page. I have a 6 by 6 paper pad, some 12 by 12 papers, a bunch of scraps, and some really picked over stickers. Here are 6 photos. They're already matted in white cardstock. For one of them, I created a photo flip, and I'll talk about that later on. I did create some embellishments with dies and scraps from this collection, those flowers and the leaves I just showed you. I have chipboard, ephemera, enamel dots. Those alphas are from my stash. I am going to show you the 2 die sets I used. One of them here for the leaves is from Elizabeth Craft Designs. The floral one is from Tim Holtz, and I'll talk about those die sets later on in the process. So what I'm going to do right now is cut up a bunch of paper to form a layered photo mat that's going to span across the 2 pages. That blue cardstock along with that wood grain paper is the paper I gutted from behind the foundation page. So I'm really not wasting anything here. And what I'm doing is I'm cutting up a bunch of papers. I will put measurements for these paper pieces on the screen a little bit later on when I place them on top of my foundation page. It's just going to make more sense when I do that. And keep in mind the measurements I put on the screen are always for visible paper only. So for a few of them, there is a bit of overlapping. For example, this floral paper here, I'm cutting narrow strips. I'm actually cutting them wider than the measurement listed on the screen. That's because I'm listing visible paper only. And you will take note where I overlap when I place everything on the page. What I'm going to do right now is apply a bit of ink to the edges of all of these papers. The ink I'm using is Morning Mist by VersaFine Claire, and I'm not going to make you watch all of it, but I do ink up all of the papers. I just find when I'm using different pattern papers, it makes them look nicer together. I'm not heavy-handed on the ink. Just a little bit goes a long way. So now I'm going to place everything on the page. So you can see basically I'm creating a border that's going to be placed towards the bottom of the page, and it's going to span across the 2 pages. And then on top of it, I have this blue block. So it's going to be bigger on the left-hand page, a little bit more narrow on the right. That's because the photo on the right takes up less space. So on the right, I have 1 large square photo. That's my focal point photo. And on the left, I have a 4-block grid. So I'm showing you right there at the bottom left is basically a photo flap. And now I'm showing you I did my journaling in advance. So basically that vellum, I'm going to be using it as a layering piece behind my focal point photo. So I printed my journaling on a piece of vellum, and what I did was I positioned it towards the bottom and justified it to the left. Now what I'm doing is trimming it down so it's 1/4 inch wider than the photo with the mat. So the width of that vellum is 5.5 inches. Now I'm just trimming it at the top. So basically I adhered my photo on top of the journaling, and what I did was I ripped it at the bottom. Now I'm going to adhere the photo with matte and vellum on top of that wood grain paper, and once again I just ripped that wood grain paper a little bit below that vellum. So that's going to go on the right hand page, and now what I'm going to do is adhere all of these page parts to my foundation page. So I'm starting with the borders. You can see that I'm adhering that small, narrow floral strip just behind that plaid paper, excuse me, that came out wrong. And now what I'm doing is I'm positioning it towards the bottom. It's basically 1 inch from the very bottom of the page. And you may notice as well, towards the middle, it kind of overlaps. That's because I just placed it right where the white cardstock ends. And what I did was I adhered it first, then I trimmed the border, the part that overhung towards the middle. I'm doing the same thing for the other page. Even though I'm putting measurements on the screen for the trimmed paper, I find it easier to do it this way because sometimes there are small discrepancies when we cut paper, even when we're measuring. It's certainly the case for me. So by trimming it after I adhere it, like what I'm doing right there, it just avoids having any little problem. For example, cutting that blue paper a little bit too short. Now what I'm doing is adhering those blue photo blocks and basically bumping them up towards the middle of the page, so it's going to span across the 2 pages. This is a really easy way to create a double page spread. It's just having one of these layered photo mats that goes directly across the 2 pages. What I'm going to do right now is adhere my focal point photo right there on the right hand page. And what I notice at this point, you're going to see me notice it in a minute. On the left hand page, the blue block towards the middle of the page is just a little bit overhanging towards the middle. I didn't like that. So off camera, I took it to my trimmer and I just trimmed it down a bit. At the same time, I adhered 3 of my 4 photos. Now what I'm going to do is adhere the little photo book. So what I'm using here is score tape, which is stronger than my usual adhesive. And I'm putting 2 strips of it behind this photo book. This is an interactive element on the page. And whenever I create something interactive on my page, I like to use this tape simply because it's stronger. What you may have noticed is I put 2 strips, but I'm only removing the wax paper for one of them. That's because this tape is really strong and somewhat unforgiving. So what I want to do is make sure I position the photo the way I want it. I press down on the adhesive, the one that I have already removed the wax paper, and when I'm happy with the positioning, then I will simply carefully lift the photo, remove the wax paper from behind the second strip there. The second strip of tape, I'm just removing the wax paper and then I press it down because I already know it's straight. Now, this little photo book here, basically it's the same size as the photo mats, which is 3.5 by 5. 3.5 being the width. The only difference is instead of cutting it at 3.5 inches wide, I cut it twice as wide at 7 inches. I scored it at 3.5 inches, which gave me a little book. I adhered 1 photo on top of it, and inside there's another photo, and I also have room for extra journaling. There's going to be a tutorial, a tips and tricks video on my channel in about a week. That will be listed and linked below, and in that video I create one of those photo flips very slowly. Now I'm showing you the 2 die sets that I use. So I did this basically while listening to a podcast. I used scraps of paper. I used that Tim Holtz floral die set, and I cut out a bunch of flowers. And this is an older die set. I think it's called Funky Florals Large, and it's from 2018. At the Scrapbook Nerd in the shop, if you look in the die section, there are a bunch of Tim Holtz floral die sets. They're fabulous, great style, kind of like this, but different than this one. The leaves are from a die set from Elizabeth Craft Designs. The last time I checked, that was still available at the shop. So if it still is, I will list it and link it below. So I've got a bunch of leaves, a bunch of flowers, and also around me, I have my picked over stickers. I have my alpha, my title already set out on wax paper. I've got chipboard, I've got ephemera, and now I'm ready to build my clusters. So the first thing I need is a tab for that little book. So I'm looking in the ephemera pieces, but I don't want to cover up the face in that photo. So I pick a smaller round one that I can put up towards the top. And now what I'm going to do is establish 3 areas for embellishment clusters, forming a visual triangle around the page. Now the base of the embellishment clusters is basically going to be these die cut leaves. So that's what you see me starting with. I'm placing them in 3 spots, and what I'm thinking at this point is I want them in 3 different sizes. So the biggest one is going to be over by the journaling and title. The next size one is going to be in the top left, and there's just going to be a hint of an embellishment cluster towards the bottom left of this layout. Now I'm coming in with one of the colors of flowers. So I'm starting with yellow, and basically I'm placing yellow in each one of these embellishment clusters. I'm going to be doing that with the red flowers and the blue flowers as well. So what I want to do here is repeat color, repeat shape, in this case flowers and leaves, but I'm still keeping in mind I want these embellishment clusters to all be different sizes. So what that's going to mean mostly is most of the flowers are going to be over on the far right. Next, it will be the top left, and in the bottom left, there will be even fewer flowers. And once I play around with this, then I come in with some other pieces as well. I will dig into the ephemera and chipboard as well. And at the very, very end, I come in with stickers. So right now, I'm just kind of playing around with the positioning of the flowers, trying to create basically organic bouquets with these flowers and leaves, keeping in mind I want them all to be different sizes, these embellishment clusters. Now I'm coming in with chipboard as well as ephemera pieces, tucking a few pieces in. I've got a piece of chipboard, that circular element over there on the right, and then I have another one right now. It's at the top left. It's kind of tucked underneath. These get switched up a bit. What I'm going to do right now, however, is start adhering. I do have more pieces I want to add to it, but at this point I have way too many loose pieces. So I'm starting on the right-hand page, the biggest cluster, and I'm starting with the leaves. And the adhesive you see me using is called Sticky Specs by Ecstasy Crafts. If it's still available at the Scrapbook Nerd, I will link it below. Basically, it's for adhering detailed die cut pieces. So these leaves are very, very detailed. What I do is I place it on top of that yellow paper, and that yellow paper is really sticky, so it picks up the adhesive. So I did that with the leaves. Now I'm coming in with the flowers, and I am popping up these flowers with some foam adhesive. And then what I will do as well is just adhere that little chipboard piece in there also. Eventually, you're going to see me adhere that title, and that comes together pretty quickly because basically for placement, I am just going to be following along that border there. You're going to see me do that in a minute. And what I do is I start with the word September, which is at the bottom, because I want to make sure that title lands right on top of that border. And I start at the end of the word because I want it to really finish over on the far right. I don't make you watch all of this, but I continue backwards with the word September. Then I did hello on top of it. I'm happy with that. Now what I'm going to do is work on the left page. And at this point, you can see I moved the year 2023, was on top of that bottom left photo. At this point, I'm thinking I want it on the top photo, but it does get switched around a little bit later on. And that's the beauty of having your title on wax paper. You get to play around with placement a bit. So I'm working on the cluster at the bottom left, and I do have a bit of trouble with that at this point. I'm thinking I like it, but at the same time, I'm starting to not like it because I'm trying to keep it small. So at this point, I've got leaves there. I've got that red flower up on top of that tab. It's not looking right because it's starting to compete with the other embellishment clusters, but I don't know what to do at this point. So I decide to remove the red flower along with the leaves, and I keep a mental note. I'm going to get back to that one later on when I can make a decision. So right now I'm adhering that tab basically in between the photo and the photo mat there for the bottom photo. And now I'm working in the top left. Once again, starting with the leaves. There's quite a bit of leaves there, almost competing with the cluster over on the far right, but not quite. However, what does change there is in that cluster in the top left, I only have 3 flowers. I put 2 big ones, and eventually I put a third small one. And if you look at the cluster on the right-hand page, in addition to the leaves and the chipboard, I have 5 flowers, 3 big ones and 2 small ones. So that cluster is much bigger than the one in the top left, which is what I'm trying to do. And again, the cluster at the bottom to form that visual triangle is going to be even smaller. So now I'm trying to fill in that spot in the middle of that block grid over on the left page. Now, originally I had leaves and flowers, but I felt that was ruining my visual triangle. So I ended up putting a piece of ephemera, another circular piece behind there. I'm much, much happier with that. And I also decide to put my year 2023 up by the tab. So that's the third place I've had the year at this point. But I'm really actually quite happy with it there. So basically, I'm pretty much done here. What I ended up doing off camera is I did add a few stickers. I added an apple pie sticker to the left-hand page in that block in the middle. And if you look at the title on the right-hand page, there's a teapot and a cup there up by the title. I quite like that. And finally, like I mentioned earlier, I did add that third flower in the top left corner. That's basically it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I'd greatly appreciate a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to the Scrapbook Nerd YouTube channel, we would be thrilled if you did. Also, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, Scrapbooking Quebec, I would be thrilled as well. Make sure you check out the Scrapbook Nerd online shop for these fun supplies and lots more. Take care, and I will see you soon on YouTube. Bye-bye.